Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Holland Podcast, back for one of our more jam-packed episodes of the season. I feel like I'm going to be saying some repeat of this for the next 6-7 weeks. It's the time of the year where the spring sports are beginning. The winter sports are really hitting their stride. We have literally 5 men's basketball games that either happened or are going to happen that we have something to talk about tonight. We have spring sports that we really want to talk about back in action. One that we were overdue to talk about, the Cougar track and field program. We love talking little H-Town Speed City here. Some football news, a football schedule is technically this year. Bobby will have football. It's a while until I start doing the days countdown, because you look at the days now and you're just like, oh, it's like 200 something. Still feeling like a while away. But in the deep, dark winter here, we can talk a little Cougar football as we now have a 2025 schedule, some coaching staff movement. Bobby, that's a whole hell of a lot of stuff to talk about. I will spare you something I have not done in my personal life. Spare you any discussion that you don't want to of any big trades that happen. Of a
Shut up. I hate you. I hate you so much. I hate you so much. I want you to know how much I hate you for bringing that up almost as much as I hate.
I didn't bring up anything. Oh, what did I bring? What did something happen this weekend? Was there a big trade for a Dallas sports team?
Do this one yourself. I'm out.
Damn.
No, I'm good. I think I jokingly told you that was a rough Saturday between and Saturday, Sunday, between having your NBA team trade away a generational talent and also, like, the big controversy in college basketball was the U of H Texas Tech game where the controversial call, it was a big
it was a controversial call, but I don't know if it was the big story from the day.
It was pretty big because, one, we lost. I mean, the bigger story is going to be like the Iowa State loss and things like that. But, like, you had that controversy as well. So, like, when I listened to our a couple of college basketball podcasts, it was their number one game they talked about. It's like, I can't get away from it. And then I was listening to a golf podcast, and, like, the last 15 minutes of their podcast was like, can you believe that Luka Doncic trade? I'm like, I want to die right now. So I'm ready to talk U of H sports and get that going.
An entirely different kind of problem than we have with football, where it's just like, well, I tuned into the Sunday college football podcast. I like it. It's like, well, at least like us dropping a game to Arizona to go to 4-7 probably isn't going to make the tight 1 hour Sunday recap for the shows I like. So
the longest 30 minutes in college football, it doesn't make it.
One of our favorite college football pods to us, split zone duo. I guess, Bobby, we'll do the least to most recent game format that we generally follow. We will talk about the game that happened almost exactly a week ago as we sit here and record. A win over the West Virginia Mountaineers, a 63-49 win in Morgantown. I don't know if this will be a half of basketball, the first half of this game, that we'll remember once the current season is finished, because it just so much happens in a season. And West Virginia, a good opponent, but not like, I just don't expect in hopefully early April after a long run in the tournament that I'll be like, Bob, yeah, remember that first half against West Virginia? No, probably not. Like, there will be some season highlights. I doubt that'll be one, even if it's one that I'd look back on like, oh yeah, we played pretty good, but not really like super memorable. But that first half will absolutely be one of the best 20-minute periods of basketball this team plays this season. They punked West Virginia. Yep. A team, for all of its flaws, probably not get punked too many more times, if any, this season like that. The Cougs out everything the Mountaineers from tip-off, with LJ Cryer, not for the last time in this week, really carrying things for you offensively. Not going to say the second half wasn't stressful, but and I'm going to pat myself on the back here. I called this in real time. I think I was the Cougar fan least surprised by the way West Virginia responded in the second half, because there was no way you were going to do that for 40 minutes against that team. Bobby, what were your big takeaways from this this Cougar road win?
You know, I think I texted you this a couple of days after, because like I was watching us, or, you know, I'm on social media, that kind of stuff, and I'm kind of perusing, and then you just see some of the discourse between the U of H fans, and it was crazy how much it was like, boy, that second half was stressful. And it's like, yeah, they only outscored us by 6 in the second half. Like, I know there were moments. I'm not going to sit here to what you said, that it wasn't overly stressful or that it was like this bad half. Like, they cut it to 6, I think, at one point.
I think 5 was the lowest, I want to say.
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I'm kind of going through. Yeah, I got the 5, 49-44 with 8 minutes left. But it never felt like it was going to... I think for me, it never felt like it was going to get closer than that. Just because throughout that time, U of H was also scoring. Like, usually when you see us kind of struggle and leads get cut, it's usually because... we are also, we can't put the ball in the bucket and we're giving up buckets. And like, obviously when a team comes back, that kind of happens, but it just felt like we were still scoring and putting up good shots and they just kind of weren't falling. Whereas it wasn't like we were getting lots of turnovers and we were playing sloppy or something like that. Like, we were still playing decent. Ball just wasn't falling for us, and shit, sometimes that happens. You know what I mean? So it wasn't that I was like, oh yeah, this game's in the bag, even though they're on a huge run. It was just kind of one of those things where you're just watching and you're just like, this feels like a game that we shouldn't have to stress over. We're up 20 at the half. That first half of basketball was just absolutely incredible. And, and I think I told you this again. You think about that stressful second half, right? And how stressful it was, and they came back and did all this. But they still only scored 30 in the second half. Like, it's not like they put up 50 and we were just, we hung on or something. They only scored 30. Like, if they had the exact same first half that they did the second half, if we played the exact same, we still win that game by 3. So, like, yeah, I wasn't... giving up 30 and a half doesn't bother me. And I know it felt kind of stressful, but again, we just weren't... the ball wasn't falling. We had open shots, things like that. But yeah, I didn't feel overly stressed out.
And if you're a Cougar fan, I think you should have expected some stress. Like, was this a game you're supposed to win? Sure. But like, not a game that you should have won running away. Probably top 5 tough roadies in Big 12 play you play when it's all said and done this year, and that West Virginia never led in this game. They never held a lead.
And this team beat Iowa State at home.
Yeah,
it's not like Morgantown. Now look, they're 4-5 in conference right now with losses to Houston, at Kansas State, versus home versus
by the way,
Arizona State.
Having a weird really good run recently. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's not like this was a team that is it the hardest game we're gonna have on the road this year? No. Is it an easy game? No. That team beat Iowa State at home. So
never gotta complain about a road win where you never trailed and won by double digits. Great job for the second game in a row against West Virginia by the Cougars, shutting down Javon Small, not letting him impact the game in any meaningful way. Bobby, his 2 lowest points outputs in all of Big 12 play are the 2 games against the Cougars. That tells you the great job he did on a guy who's been one of the more productive and positively impactful guards for his team in all of college basketball. In the preview, I think I wondered whether West Virginia could repeat some of the things they did well in the first game against the Cougars in Houston. And not surprisingly, they couldn't repeat the 3-point shooting performance a second time against this Cougar team. But they did have one of the best 2-point shooting performances against the Cougs all season of any opponent. And even with all that, this game wasn't really in doubt in the final 5 or 6 minutes. Really nice also. I think LJ Cryer is and should be anyone's game MVP from this one, but don't overlook JoJo Tugler having a nice 12.7 board performance. Reminds you that like he's not going to be your first, second, third, fourth, or any of those offensive options unless like you're having a JoJo Tugler said lot lineup for some weird reason. But that he's a guy still with a high ceiling offensively. He's a guy who he's gonna like those tools are going to get put together after the rebounding and the shot blocking and all that stuff. But he's eventually he's going to be a guy who can contribute positively on the offensive end. Again, 12 points, 7 boards, 5 and 9 from the field. You feel really good about that. This was West Virginia's lowest points scored of the current season. Their second lowest points total was the last Cougar West Virginia game played a few weeks ago in Houston. Good defensive effort again. It wasn't your best defensive week if you want to skip ahead a little bit. Like, what happened in the 2 games after this, and at times it wasn't vintage Cougar defense the 2 games after this, but this was definitely vintage Cougar defense away from home. Good workmanlike road win. You have 2 more road games left in Big 12 play against respectable non-top 25 teams. I would say Arizona State and Baylor, the 2 teams I'm referring to that meet that general description. I think if you give me anything like this win for those 2 wins, for those future dates, I'd be ecstatic. And that's kind of where I land on this. Like, was it your best effort? Was it an effort for 40 minutes that you're going to be raving about after the season, that you're going to be talking about years down the road? You'll be talking in 2028 about the West Virginia, your first ever Big 12 game at West Virginia as a win? Probably not. But it was a good effort. And I feel like we're almost at times spoiled for success. Like right now, like ask Iowa State fans, especially as their resume has started to take on a little water, they're looking a little more beatable, whether they would have liked to have that West Virginia win in the bag right now.
Yep.
Would they have liked a boring, not entirely perfect 14-point win? They sure as fuck would.
Yep.
They sure would.
Absolutely.
I think the game we're going to probably spend the most oxygen on, both games to come and games that were from last week, is the 82-81 overtime loss to the Texas Tech Red Raiders on Saturday. Bobby, before I get ahead of steam, before I get myself wound up, not that I'm too wound up about this game, really, like it is a frustrating loss, but I'm feeling at least several days removed from it, pretty peaceful about it. But just get it going, Bobby. Where would you like to start with this one?
I mean, it's pretty obvious where you have to start with this game, and it is the JT Toppin kick to the groin, flagrant 2 call. I personally, I'm just going to come out and just kind of jump right to it. Those of you who didn't watch, which I find it very hard to believe that you're a Houston Cougar fan listening to a Houston Cougar podcast and you didn't watch this game. JT Toppin gets a double teamed, and tell me if I'm wrong, gets double teamed, kind of has to make a weird, awkward pivot across his body to try and break the double team. Leg kicks out, and it kicks, I think it was Tugler, wasn't it? Was it Tugler that he kicked in the groin?
Yes, I think so.
I want to say it's JoJo Tugler.
I'm gonna watch a clip of it just to make sure someone's screaming, "It's Roberts! It's Roberts!" I'm pretty sure.
I know it wasn't Wani. Wani. It was either Tugler or Javier. And he kicks him in the groin and goes down hard. Obviously, kind of a weird situation. It was called a foul, or no, it wasn't even called a foul. It was I think there was a turnover, ball went out of bounds, something happened, and the play stopped, and timeout was called. Oh, because he was injured, because we had a guy down on the court. Cougs get the ball, they call timeout, stop it, put it under review. Flagrant 2 is called, and Texas Tech loses arguably their best player to the ejection. And then their head coach, rightfully so in my opinion, I know your feelings on their coach, gets out there and loses his mind. And I don't disagree with him there. I will say this about this call.
It was Tugler, by the way. I saw the clip.
It was perfect.
Continue. Sorry.
So here's my opinion. That's a flagrant 1. I think if I'm a Texas Tech fan, or let's say Wani does this, right? Arguably our best player, kicks a guy, goes down. Absolutely, that's a flagrant 1. If you call a flagrant 2 on that and it's on Wani, I'm losing my mind. I'm absolutely losing my mind. And then they compounded the issue of throwing a guy out when he probably didn't by also throwing the coach out. Now, I'm not saying their coach didn't react very heavily and he threw something into the stands, which should pretty much get you an ejection. But then you could, if you don't eject the coach there, you might not have as much. And if you're the coach, if you're Texas Tech's coach, you almost have to get thrown out there, right? Like you almost have to go down.
You have to get a tee. You have to get a tee. You certainly
gotta
have to
get it,
argue. You
exactly.
gotta argue for your guy. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, you got to at least
Same
get teed
Wood,
up.
certainly.
Yeah, you got to at least get teed up there. But he goes out as well. And then from there, the game never felt like it settled in. You know how a lot of times on big emotional games like that, eventually about 5 minutes into the game, the crowd kind of sits down and relaxes, and now we're playing basketball again. This felt like 40 minutes where the crowd was up the whole time and nothing ever settled in. The Cougs never looked settled. Honestly, Texas Tech never looked really settled in. It just, everything felt rushed that entire game. It felt like that game went quick. It felt like just everything was so rushed. And the Cougs never settled in and really established themselves in what the Cougs like to do. You could see the players, the emotion from Texas Tech came out. It just felt like a very unsettled game. It felt like that game was being played in the first 5 minutes of a highly ranked game, the entire game. And you could really see it, even what was happening in the stands, right? We heard about fights going on in the stands and things like that. It just was a very emotional game that never felt like it settled down because that happened so early. That ejection happens 5 minutes into the game when emotion's high, right? I just talked about how after 5 minutes it kind of settles down. That didn't happen. That big emotion, you got the big emotions, and then what happens is within those big emotions, you have this crescendo, and it never falls down. And it just felt very unsettled that entire game.
Yeah, you obviously, you give Texas Tech credit for finding a way to win this game without JT Toppin. And one of the things we pointed out about them in previewing them is that they're not a one-man team. They have a number of difference makers. It's like JT Toppin is a very good player. Pretty good chance he's a first-round pick, whether he chooses to go this year or next year. But also, it's not like, oh, who else is going to score the ball? Like, they have Chance McMillan, had a fantastic game for them. Darian Williams, like those three guys in a good supporting cast, guys like Kerwin Walton as well. Like, a deep team. That was one of the scariest things about Texas Tech on paper when you previewed them. Credit to them for winning it, but the game can kind of go two ways after that. A situation like that, controversial call, you lose one of your key guys early, your coach is fired up, the bench, I'm sure, is fired up. It was a game that, by the way, made me very happy that I'm pretty much not on social media these days, because I'm sure it's just like people just really getting in there, and that's not something I want to do anymore. I'm, for those of y'all that get some kind of kick out of that, like, great, good for y'all. But like, yeah, very emotional game, and I think Tech had it's one of those, you either fire this opponent up and get them to play out of their skin, which I think we saw, which isn't me saying that, oh, Texas Tech was lucky to win this. I mean,
no.
If anything, I think as much as any team for a 1 point margin in an overtime game, which is definitionally about the closest a game can be, that's why I said I kind of at peace with it, because I look at a lot of the ways the Cougars played in this one, and just would I've loved to have gotten the win. Do I think there were opportunities for the Cougars to close this one out? Absolutely. I mean, yeah. I'm not somebody who's quick to try to connect games also and create kind of a broader narrative, but the first half of Texas Tech almost felt maybe like a little bit of the hangover from the second half against West Virginia. You didn't close that one out. I'm not quick to do that, and I don't 100% buy that, but if you wanted to see the connection there, you kind of could.
Yeah.
A game that both fan bases, however this game would have gone, I think certainly both fan bases probably feel they should have found a way to win this game in regulation. And again, any game decided by 1 point that went to overtime is going to make you feel kind of crazy going back through this thing and that thing and the other thing, that if you just done this, wouldn't have gone to overtime, or you would have found a way to win in overtime. I mean, a shot here, a free throw miss there, probably the biggest one for me. And I know not zero number of people listening, the decision to play Emmanuel Sharp at all, much less play him in critical minutes down the stretch of this game, where he just wasn't Emmanuel Sharp. That's the highest compliment I can pay him, is I know what Emmanuel Sharp playing well at this level looks like, and it just wasn't what we saw offensively or defensively on Saturday. I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off and talk about the most painful things in terms of ways U of H didn't close out this game for me. I think the missed front end of the 1-and-1 by Milos Uzan with 35 seconds left and the Cougars up 72-69. Granted, even if Uzan makes the first and miss the second free throw, you're up 73-69. not impossible. Tech could find a way to force OT there. We saw U of H do it in an even more improbable situation up in Lawrence, Kansas. But no one would argue a 4-point lead in that spot instead of a 3-point lead like the Cougars had. And ultimately, Chance McMillan very shortly after hits what was the game tying three-pointer. Man, you get the front end make there. You're just feeling so much better about closing this out in regulation. And I think the more obvious but less flagrant missed chance was, Lonnie Roberts only making one of 2 free throws when he went to the line with 24 seconds left in the first OT period. I say less flagrant because, quite frankly, the fact that Wani going up to the line there, 5 of 7 from the charity stripe, was him
You've already gotten more from him.
Yeah, you've already gotten more from him than you should probably fairly expect. It still did hurt, though. Yeah, that's kind of where I am a few days after this one. Like, I look at it, it just wasn't a crisp defensive effort. Didn't feel like you matched them emotionally at times. And, they had the boost of Toppin getting ejected there. But I think this would have been a close game regardless. It's going to sound crazy because Toppin's such a good player. I think this would have looked similar to this, whether he gets ejected or not.
Yeah, I mean, if Toppin's in the game, does Chance McMillan go for 23? Does Elijah Hawkins go for 17, right?
Yeah, should have mentioned him.
It's kind of how you distribute the points, right? It's not like you would suddenly start getting more points. I don't think U of H is giving up more than 75 to this Texas Tech team, which is about what they had in regulation. So I think this really exposed something for U of H. And I hate saying this one game exposed something, but it kind of did. And I've said all season. Now, let me preface this by saying a couple of things. Number one, I am probably the president of the Juwan Roberts fan club. I don't think anyone is more a fan of Wani Roberts outside of his family than me. I love his game. I've also said all year that the one thing that I don't like about this team that concerns me is there's not somebody who's going to be the guy who can get you a bucket when you need a bucket. And it seems late in the season, where we are now, the last 5-6 games, that guy has been Wani Roberts. He got it done against everybody that he's needed to get it done against. UCF, Kansas, like we've seen it. But this game showed something. And it showed that a guy who shoots 57% from the free throw line cannot be your end of game guy. There's nothing against Wani. But if you're an opposing team and you're in the bonus or the double bonus, why not just hack the shit out of Wani there? He gets the ball, foul him hard, make him make 2. And this isn't like me beating up on Wani. Wani does everything well except shoot free throws. And that's okay. Would I love him to shoot 80% from the free throw line? Absolutely, I would. But at some point, a guard's going to have to knock down a shot. And I know against Kansas, Milos and Emmanuel Sharp did. And I'm not saying that they didn't. But it's clear that this team depends on Wani Roberts when you need a bucket. In this game, that missed free throw shows that maybe that's not the best to have a 57% free throw shooter as your go-to guy, because teams can foul him, and statistically, you're getting 1 out of 2. And it's just kind of that simple for me.
I think I actually agree with you, but I think you're pointing it the wrong direction. I think Uzan and Arsenault not being reliable, like in late free throw shooting situations, to me is a more glaring problem, because Sharp and Cryer, for any of their issues, whether it's Sharp just not being healthy recently, Cryer having his games, but also just having games where he's been ice cold, maybe not giving it to you like close to as consistently as you want, but maybe just the floor's a little lower than you want in some games, and his ability to do things inside the arc's a little less than you want. But like those guys, if they're getting fouled, some of the best free throw shooters in the country. Like for any you want to say about those guys, like Emmanuel Sharp and LJ Cryer are about as good as anyone in the country going to the line in a situation where you need 2 free throw makes.
Right.
It's the fact that it's only those two guys, and that your primary ball handler, the guy you're most comfortable with, trying to bring it up in a late game situation, not get the 10 seconds called on you, is a guy in Uzan who's not a bad free throw shooter, but doesn't go there very often. And I mean, just he missed the front end of 1-on-1, at least one in the Kansas game, misses a critical front end of the 1-on-1 here. He's not as good at the free throw line as I want your point guard to be. And I like guys are a work in progress. Like Galen Robinson, pretty solid free throw shooter by his last Cougar season. Bless his heart, was awful at the free throw line his first couple years in the program. Guys grow. I'm saying this not to shit on Galen Robinson, one of my absolute favorite Cougars ever. Guys develop, guys grow. Like Uzan by the end of his Cougar career could get to an acceptable level there. Arsenault, same thing. I want U of H to be able to have 3 or 4 guys in a late game situation out there that you're comfortable taking a free throw instead of 2. That's how I see that problem. I would say I agree with most of what you're saying, but I would like those 2 guys instead of being like, and you're not doing this, but instead of being like, why is Roberts not shoot free throws better? It's just like,
I don't know if I'm necessarily saying, why doesn't he shoot free throws better? I think it's more.
No, I'm saying that's a Cougar fan. That's a Cougar fan thing. I'm saying you don't believe that, but
right. And I don't even think it's necessarily a free throw problem. It's that Wani is your end of game guy when he struggles with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
so it's kind of the combo of the two. It's not that it's frustrating that like Wani can't struggles with free throws. So that's the problem. The problem is Wani's your go-to guy. To everything that you said, if you need a bucket, we go to Wani. I would much rather. I think the problem is that Wani's your go-to guy instead of a guard who can make free throws. The fact that we kind of trust Wani to make a bucket more than we trust Emmanuel Sharp or LJ Cryer when we need a bucket to get us 2, that to me is more of the problem than it is anything else. I think having Wani as your go-to we need a bucket guy is a problem, and it's a problem because of the free throws.
That's fair. But I also think the two of us spending this long on offense when you allowed, 70-something points from tech and regulation, not looking at the biggest problem here, because I think I scapegoated Sharp earlier, but this was a poor team defensive performance. Even acknowledging, like we did before the game, that Tech is the best offensive team the Cougars have seen at the Fertitta Center this year. The only reason Tech isn't the best offensive team you've seen this year, period, is that you had Auburn and Bama, who are like the number 1 and number 2 in most metrics offensive teams in the country right now. Still, even acknowledging how good Tech is on that side, in that aspect of their game, that first half was one of the worst halves of defensive basketball that I've seen the Cougars play in a while. You could acknowledge it's against a good opponent. It was both. It was both. You're facing a good opponent, but I mean, God, we were on pace to get like 90-something points. Yeah, like you knew that probably wasn't sustainable for the entire half or the entire 40 minutes of basketball. But I just kind of remember sitting after that first half and being like, I don't think I've seen an opponent light us up like that in the Fertitta Center in a while. You know?
Yeah, it was definitely a concern at some point.
I think Tech also, Kansas to a lesser extent the week prior, exposed kind of the lack of depth you have in the backcourt right now, because you don't have an Emmanuel Sharp at full health. Mm-hmm. He's sitting out this coming week injured. Ramon Walker is still out. Right now, Kelvin Sampson clearly doesn't trust Mercy Miller against this level of opponent, against most Big 12 opponents right now. So that basically gives you Uzan, Cryer, Arsenault, and Malik Wilson. Still a good group, but against the very best of the best in the Big 12, maybe a group that doesn't leave you much margin for error. And again, margin for error in a game Saturday that was about the closest you could possibly script.
Yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly. You want to see, and we'll talk about it in the next game. I said going into the season that a 3 or 4 seed, as long as we're healthy, I'm okay with that. And hopefully that's kind of where we fall and we get some of this. We get healthy again.
I wouldn't mind a 2 seed if we were healthy either.
No,
I'm good with the 1 seed. I'm good with the 1 seed. Like, I mean, if we don't lose another game, I'm not going to sneeze at that, but I'm like you, healthy in March. That's what we want.
Yeah. I want us to be healthy. So, that's just kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, again, say it. If I said it once, I've said it at least 5 times this segment. The narrowest margin away possible this game was from the two of us. I mean, your made shot here, those of us being, you and I coming back and be like, wow, man, like, the Cougs pulled it out. Like, a shot, like, it's the fine margins in sports. Like, that's how close it is for us talking an entirely different way about this basketball game. And that's the great thing about this conference, unlike the American, where either you lost to a bad non-Memphis team where you're like, oh my God, like, how much is our resume going to take a hit from this? Or you lost to Memphis, which, self-explanatory. Never enjoyed losing to Memphis the times we did.
Yeah, never really had a lot of fun losing to Memphis.
It's still a loss. It's still a loss to an in-state opponent. An in-state opponent who, from the sound of things, talked a lot of mess online afterwards. But you saw how basically nobody's perception of U of H has radically changed by this. The Cougs actually went up in the polls. Like, on Monday, you're still number 3 in the net. As of recording, you're kind of basically trading off between 2 and 3 on KenPom. I mean, nobody's priors about U of H are changing. And I'm going to double down on what I think I texted you Saturday night, but it could have been Sunday morning. I can't remember for sure. I don't think we lose to Tech twice this year. Could be wrong. Been wrong once or twice before. I don't see this game happening a second time. As much as the game at Tech, I think, is actually the hardest game on paper left in the schedule. It's either that or Arizona, really, at Arizona. I don't see us losing it twice. And, you can talk, if it happens that we do, you can, pull this and tell me what an idiot I am. Any Tech fans who are hate listening or, I guess, happy listening to this.
Oh, I thought it was me. I was like, I'll call you an idiot. I don't care.
Oh yeah, you too. You're welcome. You're part of that Big Ten as well. But I don't think this happens twice. It's my last thought on this game.
I don't disagree.
And the third and final game that we're going to talk about was the Cougars' 72-63 win last night at the Fertitta Center over the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Bobby, the biggest courtesy I will do this program is to set a 5-minute timer on myself talking about this basketball. It's not proverbial. I'm opening my Steve Jobs phone right now and setting a little stopwatch because this very much looked like a team, Bobby, that was missing three starters / rotation guys. This very much looked like a team at times. Sleepwalking is the wrong word for it, but like one level above sleepwalking, maybe not the A+ effort. And OSU does match up for you worse than, I would say, your average team of OSU's general profile. They want to push tempo. They want to press defensively. Those things seem to stress this Cougar team. And it also helped for the first 10 to 15 minutes of this game that OSU, practically everything they threw up in the basket went in. I'm kind of split on this, Bobby. Like, do you think that was more the Cowboys just being absurdly hot or like poor defense? Because I've watched it the first half twice now, and I don't have a strong opinion about it.
I mean, can it be both, right? They had some open looks, they had some easier shots, but they also had some difficult shots that were just going in. So I kind of felt like it was a yes and situation. Yes, the Cougars played good defense. Yes, they were hot, but also there were some flaws. There were some shots that probably shouldn't have gone in. So, that's basketball. I think at one point, OSU was shooting look at what they shot on the game, 51%.
It was something in the 70s. It was like 75% or something like that at one point when they were up 18-9 or something like that.
Yeah, it's like if a team shoots 50% from the field, it's both bad defense and they're making shots.
I'm going to assign percentages here. I'll say 60% OSU, just fantastic shot making. You see, again, you remember from the AAC days, teams that come to the Fertitta Center and kind of like punch you pretty hard at first. And especially the last season we were in the American, I felt like you got a lot of just really just guys playing out of their skin efforts against you. But also, I don't think you should just make it sound it was great shot making by OSU. It also wasn't your best defensive performance. My only other major thought on this one, and again, acknowledge that U of H wasn't playing close to full strength. I'd rather U of H win ugly than play any of the guys that we were sitting out in this game, whether any kind of short-term injury they're dealing with. I'd rather this game have been closer than we would have liked than have played any of those guys any earlier than they're ready to come back. We've also now had 4 or 5-ish halves in a row of a typical Cougar defense since about the second half of the West Virginia game. Not saying the Texas Tech game was 40 minutes of bad defense. Like, you played a lot better defensively in the second half of that one. And I don't believe there's anything fundamentally broken with this team. Just teams have lulls. It's a long season. Teams have stretches where, you've played 3 games in the last 7 days, one of which was an extremely draining overtime emotional game against, in-state opponent. Just kind of, it hasn't been the best 3-game run, but you could still feel glad that you were 2-1 in that stretch. Also, we'll note, I don't think Terrence Arsenault had a very good shooting performance this one. I don't think I'm saying anything super insightful by saying that, but I thought he did a good job creating for his teammates. It was the most I'd seen Arsenault do that this season, and we're always kind of looking for guys besides Milos Uzan to fill that role. And Malik Wilson's done it at times as well. I think this is the best Terrence Arsenault has done there. I think an ugly win that I don't think we're doing anyone a disservice by not spending the next 30 minutes on it. Again, great news. It's a win and not something anyone will think about at the end of this year other than maybe Oklahoma State fans. I think not incorrectly, like looking for some positives in a tough year one for Steve Lutz, who I think is a good coach there. I think he's going to eventually get them winning just because of what he did his last 2 stops. And I think he had a good plan for the Cougs. And I think they did some great shot making, and yet you still won by 9, which I think you'd be happy about it, and hopefully commit yourself to not remembering very much about this basketball game in a week's time.
Yeah, I mean, I sent you. This game was all about health for me. I think I sent you and Dustin a text that said when we play Oklahoma State. I sent it to you each independently, not in our group text. I think I said when we play Oklahoma State, because this was right after Javier went down and Wani's ankle was flat. The ankle bone was flat on the court. I sent when we play Oklahoma State, the lineup should be Sedlot, JoJo Tugler, Terrence Arsenault, Malik Wilson, LJ Cryer. That should have been the 5. I was a-okay putting.
We did get some early set. We got earlier than usual Sedlot minutes.
Yes,
you weren't totally off there.
And my argument there was you can keep Wani and Francis in uniform for depth in case there's fouls or something like that. But like after that Texas Tech game, it seemed like we were going down like flies, and I wanted a 1-point win against. I wanted a simple 1-point win versus Oklahoma State if you gave me everyone being rested. I was a-okay with that. Get the win, get out of there. Oh, and when I sent that to Dustin at first, it was like before the game ended with Texas Tech, and I was like, if we get the win, we absolutely should do this. And then I was like, after we lost, it's like, well, maybe if Wani's okay, I'm okay with it, but like, dude, have at it. Like, I just wanted a 1-point win here where we got to rest everybody. Now, if we were going full bore and we had the full lineup, yeah, I didn't want a 1-point win. But if you told me I was going to be able to rest a bunch of my guys and we were going to get a 9-point win, I'd have taken it.
Speaking of teams that are not very good and we're not going to spend very much time on, but we're still going to make sure we preview them, Saturday's game, early afternoon against the Colorado Buffaloes in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. Bobby, gonna cold take myself here. When Colorado was officially announced as moving to the Big 12, I think it's been a couple years now, I actually thought their men's basketball team was a sneaky good ad. Not a program in the level of like Arizona or something like that, but they'd been to the NCAA tournament coming into the season 2 of the last 4 seasons, went to the Sweet 16 last year. If they had held a tournament in 2020, almost certainly would have been in the field of 68 for that one. And even their 2 non-tournament teams over this most recent stretch weren't like hilariously bad teams. They were NIT level teams. So it's like, all right, like lower half of the conference team, but not really dragging down your strength of schedule. They're 0-10 in Big 12 play.
Yeah, not great.
They did get a brutal draw to open their Big 12 existence. Iowa State at home, that's a tough opener. Road trip to one of the few teams who actually knows you decently well in Arizona State. Cross-country roadie to UCF right afterwards, which CU only lost by 1 point. Don't know if I have an easy time making a case for recent results like losing by 16 at home to BYU, who's improved, but like you lost by 16 at home to them. Losing by 6 at home to a Cincy team that has no other wins besides that one away from the Cincinnati metropolitan area this year. Lost by 10 at Oklahoma State as well. I mean, I think probably the biggest red flag before the season should have been the fact that they lost two guys who are currently in the NBA. Whatever, that's going to happen if you recruit well like they have. Cody Williams, who was the 10th pick in last year's draft, and KJ Simpson, who was a second-round guy. Those are two big losses, but they also lost three guys who elected to play their fifth year somewhere other than CU. Eddie Lumpkin, a Houston area kid, Javon Hadley, and Luke O'Brien, who are all playing other power conference programs. It's like these guys didn't want to stick around for the first Big 12 season. I think that's kind of a red flag here. So it's kind of clear this combination of returning players that they brought back from last year and some veteran transfers they brought in from a smaller college level aren't really working out. Bobby, what can you tell me about the Colorado Buffs that I have not already said?
That they turn the ball over a ton. They are 353rd in the country on turnover percentage. And I don't know if you know this, Sam. The Cougs do a really good job of turning teams over. Really good. We are number 11 in the country in that. Also, you look at the rebound percentage. Colorado does not grab a lot of offensive rebounds. The Cougs do. That being said, Colorado is 66th in offensive rebound percentage given up, which is, kind of nice for them. But overall, this is going to be... The Cougs should walk away with this one. Not to sound overly confident, but this is a game that the Cougs should win here. And win pretty easily.
I always try and look at every Big 12 opponent and the better non-conference ones and kind of map out how that team could pull the upset. And the only thing I'm really coming up with on Colorado is they're very good at drawing fouls and one of the better teams in the country at making those free throws. They're going to, I'm sure, have a bigger crowd than usual. It's Saturday afternoon game against a team with a small number next to their name. We see it in college basketball. Some of those most unlikely upsets are brewed from just these kinds of situations. But you said it. They're awful at taking care of the basketball. They're good at keeping opponents off the offensive glass, but they're not great at getting them themselves. And outside of the free throw shooting, they're just not very good at putting the ball in the basket. Not a very good defensive team either. You look at the Big 12 only offensive and defensive breakouts. CU's not dead last in anything, but they're like near the bottom in both categories. It's not like they're a good offensive team but not great defensively, or they're good at keeping opponents from scoring, but God, they can barely put the ball in the basket, kind of like Iowa State was 2 years ago when they were first getting up and going under Otzelberger. They're not really that good at much. Am I saying there's no way they can pull the upset here? Absolutely not. Like, I have seen much crazier upsets in years of watching college basketball. UH is not fully healthy right now. I'm not sure if it's this opponent with what they've been able to do this year. Mm-hmm. Are there teams that could get U of H right now that are on the balance way worse than you? I mean, I just mentioned it, like Arizona State. At Arizona State. I know Arizona is the big game of that few game stretch here in a couple weeks, but like Arizona State might be a trickier one than Cougar fans think. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's this opponent.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but
God, I hope you're not.
Yeah. Right. So that's all I've got in Colorado, Bobby. Bigger game, a big Monday nationally televised game against the Baylor Bears. You get the ESPN Monday night broadcast. You get my good buddy Fran Fraschilla, I assume, is going to be on the call telling us all about his refereeing friends. Somehow working in Jamal, which I love Jamal Shed talk, but he's going to find a way to work in Jamal Shed in a weird spot that you don't expect. He's going to, talk a lot at Fran Fraschilla, but in all seriousness, the actual basketball game we're going to get to, the Baylor Bears. Well, I think the Cougars can win, but a good enough opponent with the way this team has been playing right now that I'm not wildly confident in that. Bobby, you're the only one of us that spent some time growing up in Waco, so I will give you the first crack beyond what I've said here. What should we know about the 24-25 Baylor Bears men's basketball team?
I would say the biggest thing when it comes to Baylor, and this was the same thing that we ran across with Texas Tech, right? Really, really good offensive team. Number 12 in the country, according to Ken Pom, against a really good Houston defense. And I think with Texas Tech, we kind of made the comment, I believe in the Houston defense. can Texas Tech's defense stop the Houston offense? And we're kind of in the same situation here, right? This Baylor defense isn't very good. Their offense is good. Can the Cougs defensively hold Baylor down enough to score to win this game? It's going to be a strength-on-strength matchup, which is always fun. One end of the court's going to be electric. The other end, hopefully for Cougar fans, is not electric, and we're just scoring at will. You brought up how this team is played recently in the defense. I really think that there's a chance we don't see Sharp again versus Colorado. I think Colorado is another great opportunity to kind of give you guys a little bit of a break.
Floored if Sharp plays up in Boulder.
If you watched any of Sampson's post-game press conference, I don't know if you did, Sam, after last night's game, the whole press conference was basically him going, "We just need a break." So I think the Colorado game, if we can get some guys to really get rested, they can come back and beat this Baylor team. With it being at Fertitta, it's hard for me to pick against the Cougs at Fertitta. I know Texas Tech just pulled off the upset, but it's trying not to be too reactionary to that.
Yeah.
I think the way the schedule laid out, if you were going to losing to Texas Tech wasn't that bad because you follow it up with 2 games against some of the lower teams in this conference. Not saying that they're necessarily these terrible teams, but you get to play a team outside top 100 in Ken Palm in Colorado. So I think going into this Baylor game, the Cougs should be healthier and kind of getting that early February, kind of when you want to start getting hot for the tournament. I think it gets started here against the Baylor Bears.
I can see that. With Baylor, I'd be very surprised if in about a month and a half time and we're seeing the tournament field that they're not in the field and they're not somewhere between like a 7 or 9 seed, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. And any criticism of Baylor head coach Scott Drew, which I'm kind of about to do, I think should note the fact that in their first 100-ish years of having a men's college basketball program, they made the NCAA tournament 4 times. And under Drew, they've gone 12 and are certainly going to be, or almost certainly going to be going a 13th time this season. Hey, winning the whole thing 3 years ago, I think that 2020 Baylor team that didn't get to play in the tournament would have been one of the very best in that field if that one ends up getting played. I say all that, teeing up my criticism. Baylor has the talent on this roster to be a whole lot better than the kind of team we've seen this season. They were picked 4th in the conference of the preseason, just behind the Cougars and Iowa State. No. It was actually, I think they were ahead of Iowa State, but behind Arizona. I think it was Kansas, Cougs, Arizona, Baylor, Iowa State. Sorry. I don't think any Baylor fan would take issue with me saying that they haven't lived up to that preseason hype this season. Not that they're a bad team, they just haven't lived up to that preseason hype. And if the Cougars, not to be too reactionary, if you defend like you did against Texas Tech, Baylor is more than good enough offensively to make next Monday night's game pretty uncomfortable. I don't think they're as good defensively as Texas Tech. I know Texas Tech is a worse defensive team than offensive. I think it would be unfair to the Red Raiders to say they're on Baylor's. I think they're a good bit better in that aspect of their game than the Bears. Baylor doesn't shoot the ball as well as Tech, but they do a lot of other things really well offensively. They're good at shooting from beyond the arc, which has kind of been the Cougs' most recent defensive Achilles heel. They're a very good offensive rebounding team as well. And not to bring up one of our more recent NCAA tournament nemesis. I think that's the plural of nemesis, right?
Nemesi.
Norchad Omeyer, previously of that 2023 Miami team that just blew us out of the water in the Sweet 16 of that tournament. He transferred into Baylor this past offseason. As of recording, is top 40 nationally in both offensive and defensive rebounding. Like, he's an undersized big man. We respect an undersized big man on this podcast.
One thing we like.
It's 6'7" guys who are inexplicably really good at offensive rebounding. We stand. Honestly, even if we don't stand the Baylor Bears, we stand the undersized college big man. Another guy in their front court, Josh Ojianwuna. He's a really plus rebounder as well. Is having his best offensive season in college, more of a traditional big man than Omeyer. Where it gets tougher for Baylor is what I said a moment ago, defensively. And that's been kind of the problem with Baylor's last 3 teams, including this season.
Mm-hmm.
Very good offensively, not able to stop opponents often enough to truly take that step from good to very good to serious contender. They're 321st in the country in 3-point field goal defense, well outside the top 200 nationally in opponent effective field goal percentage. They're good at turning opponents over, and that's basically the end of the list of things they do really well defensively, which I think is not a recipe for winning at the Fertitta Center. And they've been pretty good at Foster Pavilion. They picked off Kansas with an incredible comeback last weekend, but away from Foster Pavilion, they've, other than a crazy double overtime non-conference one, I want to say it was over St. John's. I didn't put this in my notes, but they haven't been that great in road environments, and I don't know if Monday is going to change it, but they're good enough if the Cougs don't bring an A effort that we're going to sweat this one.
Oh yeah, this is not a game where the Cougs should be like, oh yeah, if we come with a B game, we're gonna win this game comfortably. Like maybe you can get away with versus an Oklahoma State or Colorado. You better come with at worst an A- game at this Baylor, especially offensively. Defense, like I said, Baylor can put the ball in the bucket, and if you are struggling putting the ball in the bucket, this game could get ugly very quickly for the Cougs.
My last thought, the health of 2 different Baylor players is going to be really critical in this one. They just had super senior Jeremy Roach, who was a big headline of the entire college basketball offseason, transferring in to Baylor from Duke. Was back last night against Texas Tech after missing the previous 4 Big 12 games. Played like a guy coming off of an extended layoff. Roach, for the season, is shooting way worse than his career averages during this partial season at Baylor. This would be a big game for him to change that narrative, but coming off a semi-long-term injury, probably not the easiest to do. And the other guy I wanted to mention is VJ Edgecombe, Baylor's latest superstar high school recruit. Pretty safe bet, Edgecombe to be a lottery pick in this coming summer's draft. Edgecombe's a big guard who could score at all 3 levels, active defensively, rolled his ankle midway through that crazy comeback home win over Kansas and didn't play against Texas Tech. I think, gun to my head, he plays Monday night, but how close to 100% he's able to be, I think that's the $1 million question, because he was fantastic in January. Mm-hmm. As much as Baylor did anything well, it was from VJ Edgecombe, and very much validated any kind of freshman year hype for the guy. Very, very much cemented that, yeah, this is a one and done. Like, this guy will be a professional in about 5-6 months here. But how healthy he's going to be, I think Baylor would certainly like to have both those guys at full health. And even at full health, this hasn't been necessarily the team they expected to be. And we're going to switch to Cougar football. As I alluded to at the very top of the show, we are many days away until the start of football season. But earlier this week, we got the official release of the 2025 Cougar football schedule. We knew the opponents, but now we at least have the dates of the games, knowing who's going to be, it is the first season you're not technically playing back-to-back home games. You're doing I know one of them is like you play at home against SFA and you go to Rice. That's essentially 2 home games in a row, but kind of crazy you're alternating like that.
I feel like Duarte said this was like the first time in like 75 years or something like that.
Yeah. No, it was the first time. And like, I was just pointing out that yes, technically, but one of those is like home game and then Rice. Right. But no, it is first time in all those years that you've had the alternating home and aways like this. Bobby, I know the specific topic is one that you were dying to talk about, so give me all your thoughts, all your rants, anything you want to throw at me about the 2025 Cougar football schedule.
Okay, so I'll talk about the actual schedule first. And first of all, opening on a Thursday night versus SFA, that sucks. Let's just be honest. There's something about that first Saturday that you kind of get excited for. That like Friday night before, you're kind of like, oh my God, college football kicks off. It happens Thursday, and it's against SFA. Not exactly the most exciting. Some really good roadies in here. Corvallis, I've heard it's gorgeous. I'll probably be at Stillwater because it's not too far. Site of one of my favorite memories of all time. Just a great time there. Arizona State, another good roadie. I'll skip the Bounce House at UCF. That is a flawed.
Arizona. I was gonna say Arizona State was one. I was like, oh yeah, I'm really excited. And that is the same day that co-host emeritus of the show Dustin is getting married. And I'm like,
yes,
yeah, I guess I won't skip your wedding for a football game at ASU, buddy.
Yeah, and UCF going that not a great roadie. It's a flaw, not a feature. Your stadium shouldn't bounce like that. Get better.
You don't want to see. You want to see the scenic metropolis of Orlando.
As somebody who was just there, no. And then you do go on the road to Baylor. Fun, easy road trip for a lot of Cougar fans. And again, my parents live in Waco, so that's going to make it a lot easier for me to go. But the thing I really want to talk about, great roadies. I think this team has an opportunity to go to a bowl. The schedule's not as brutal as it was this past year. But the thing we need to discuss as Cougar fans.
What do we need to discuss, Bobby?
How in the hell do we not have a funny video or fun schedule release? We get one freaking tweet that's like, hey, here's the graphic of our schedule. Check it out. Dude, did you watch the BYU one?
I did not. You described it to me, but I have not watched any
They
of the
got
schedule
Simpsons
release stuff.
clips. They got Simpsons clips that relate to all the different games.
That's fantastic.
So there's one... the best. So for Texas Tech, right? Somebody comes to the door and one of the characters is telling this story and they go, and it all happened in Lubbock, Texas, right? It's this whole dramatic thing. But the best thing BYU did was, the aliens in the Treehouse of Horror episodes?
Yeah, Kang and Kodos, yep.
That's why you're one of my best friends, right there, for knowing their name. They knock on the door. And Homer opens it, and he sees him, and he goes, and this is for BYU's bye week. Like, they have the bye week listed. He opens up the door, and it's a scene where Homer goes, oh, Mormons.
Yeah, that's right.
It's so good, right? Whether you think these are funny, clever, quirky, whatever, it engages people. UCF did
UCF's great, the social media stuff. Like, that's the thing. You can say what you want about UCF. They're great at social media in a way that we are not.
And like they did a Jeopardy with Shaquille Griffin and one of the other guys was Nitro. Stupid name, by the way. Nitro, their mascot. And then it was like some other guy. And it was like they had a schedule release Jeopardy and it was like clues. And so like for U of H, it goes, the city's only tie with space is blank, we have a problem. And it was like Houston. And it's like, okay, like that's not true, but also kind of funny, right? Taking little shots like that. It was a bye week, right? And they had the tall guy. I don't know if he's a basketball player. I didn't look the guy up. Maybe he plays football. And it was like, which of these is a real tweet or isn't a real tweet? And it showed him at like, he's got this girl on his shoulders and it says, my first spring break in America. And like, it's him. And so like TCU, I thought theirs was lame as hell, right? Every game, it was a clip versus it was a clip in a NCAA football 24 and it was super lame. But they did something. I want to say it was Baylor, maybe Cincinnati. Did it? Is it real or is it cake? Whole thing. And like their Arizona one was a cactus, was like a cactus, and they tried to cut it, and it was a cake. And then for U of H, it was like a die-cast car, like a 1 to 8 car. A slab. And it was a slab. And it had like everything on it. They tried to cut it, and it wasn't cake. It was a real like die-cast car. You have to do something. Like, it's so bad, and I don't know who's responsible for it, and I do actually know who's responsible for it, but I'm not going to call this person out because that's not what we do here.
That's not what we do here.
We have to be better. We cannot just say, here's the schedule, guys, enjoy. That's why we lost a generation of Cougar fans. I will, till I die, the Big 12 not being a part of the Big 12, and then doing nothing to engage with students or anything like that, pretty much till that 05-06 season, we've never embraced anything new. It took you freaking 2 months to get your Cougar Blue apparel from the bookstore.
I'm just happy they had it. That's how low the bar is on some stuff. I was happy that they had it in there.
But I was like, I wonder what cool thing we did for schedule release. And I go to our website, or I go to our Twitter account, and I click it, and it's,
here's our schedule, and it's a fucking picture. It's a fucking JPEG. It's absurd. Do something. I know we're broke, right? I know as an athletic department, we can't even fire coaches that are bad. I cannot explain to you how piss poor marketing this is from this athletic department. It's been bad. We got a new AD, and I was like, maybe things will change. And some of our video stuff has changed. We're getting more interviews. We actually can
really quick. Like they've done some, like the last 2 football signing days, they've done cool stuff for like the various signees. Like I thought they've like done stuff that was notably like better than the bare minimum and like creative. Like so it almost makes it more maddening, like something like this.
Yes,
I know there are people there who know how to do this stuff. Why isn't it happening here? Like this feels kind of like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, is it also feels like this is the same graphic we got last year. The font looks the same. Yeah. And like, I know it's probably not, right? Or, you know, when you look at it and some design person who's listening to this is like, actually, this is the different font. Okay, but it feels the exact same that it did last year. And this is just, it's just an indictment of this athletic department sometimes, is that, hey, we're just trying to survive. We're just trying to survive here. We're just trying to do the best that we can at all times, and we're just going to do the bare minimum, and our fans will keep showing up, and we just keep getting kicked in the fucking teeth every single year, week on week. What was it, 2-3 years ago, we didn't even have a spring game. And like, look, I understand some of the bigger programs are getting rid of spring games because they've been actively recruited from, but like we didn't even like take it indoors and do like a fan excitement day or anything like that. It's just, what do we do to engage our fan base? I would argue me, you, our friends over at Go Cougs do more than this athletic department could ever possibly think of to engage with this fan base. And it sucks, man. It absolutely sucks.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add on that. I don't really disagree with any of it. Just reiterate what I said. Like, they've done cool stuff with this in the past. Like this, I want to say, I can't remember if it was this football signing class or the one from last season, but they did like the slab stuff with them. Like that's cool. Like the blue release videos, I think have been kind of cool. The way they teased it when it went out on November 1st, like that was pretty cool. Like there are creative people capable of doing interesting stuff. It just feels like institutional inertia, or just like, and like I'm sure, and like somebody will go off the, like there's a not 0% chance someone will be like, well, the reason it wasn't done is this, and like U of H people love making a fucking excuse. They love it. They love excuses.
Yes,
they love why we can't do this instead of thinking about how we can.
I pulled up the Twitter account and I'm looking at past schedule releases. Okay, last year we had one. I thought it was kind of lame because it was just like generic highlights of guys celebrating and shots of the stadium we were playing in. But like, cool, it's something. You go back to 2023, hilarious. UTSA is the first game. Guess what? There's a picture of Roadrunner. The Roadrunner from Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. The next game was versus Rice. Guess what? You got the Tootsie Pop owl, right? How many licks does it take? The next game was versus TCU. It's versus TCU. They have the guy who does the Kermit inside of his car, and it's Shorty, I don't mind, right? It's that, like, do something, man. 2020 had a video release. 2020. Do you remember the 2020 season?
I prefer not to, but yes, I do.
Right. Like, granted, it was video of landmarks around Houston. Like, not great, but it's something. This is awful.
I'm not going to name them, but like, there was somebody who was here under the last football coaching staff who I think was instrumental to that stuff, who's no longer the 2020 and 2023, who's no longer here. I'm not using like I again.
No, I got you.
I don't think the current staff, the football staff, they should be focused on getting good football players here, and I guess certain people figure out how to pay them. So I'm not, but like there should be people whose job is like creative stuff, and there are creative people at U of H. Again, I just feel like it's institutional inertia kind of rearing its ugly head here.
Yep.
Last schedule thoughts real quick. I am very much considering, especially because it's not in my significant other's birthday month where my football trips are frowned upon. I will be maybe going to Corvallis if any Cougars are thinking about doing that.
I'm thinking about going there.
It's
too.
about it's about a 2-hour drive, and also this is what made me think about more, Bobby, because it's about 25-30 minutes from UO, Oregon, and Eugene.
Yeah,
but like obviously limited number of hotel rooms like in the vicinity of there. Like I had to because it was the same weekend as the Cougar basketball game in November of 22. I went out there and it was the same weekend as their senior day for football. So I had to stay like 30 miles away. It was a beautiful place, but like you don't ever want to stay 30 miles from where you're going to an event.
Right.
So, but Oregon not playing that weekend. So like it's good. No, good because it's not going to be
that's a good.
It's not going to be a fortune, or you have to stay like 50 miles away in Salem or something like that to get a hotel for this game. So I'm definitely thinking about that one. And yeah, like I know opening, like I love the Thursday night football slate, but nobody wants to be on it. Like you want to have college football on your TV, but unless you're playing like one of the big games against the big, even then, like you don't want to play a really big opponent week 1 unless it's like a OU situation from like 8 years ago, you know?
Right. Yep.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think wish U of H would have done more to promote it. Think it's a schedule U of H could go bowling against, and some tasty games to talk about here in 5 or 6 months, friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait.
Really quick, we did not talk about the last week. We probably should have. So we are going to talk about Cougar Track and Field, who have been in action at 2 different meets in the past week. Like I said, overdue to talk about this program last week. We wanted to talk about them, but figured instead of burying them at the end of a 100-minute podcast, we'd come back this week and talk about them a bit earlier. I would say an hour and some change qualifies as a bit earlier here. In the 2 weeks, we've had 2 different meets to discuss. In the interest of giving each of us a manageable amount of Cougar stuff to research this episode, we've split it into 2 meets. I will talk about the more recent Robert Platt Invitational a bit later. Bobby will mention the previous weekend's Ted Nelson Invitational at Texas A&M. Bobby, does that still work for you, friend?
Yeah.
It'd be very funny if you were just like, nah, man, I have no idea.
No, man,
I have no idea what happened. Go for it, bud.
All right. So, just a really good week for Cougar Track at that meet. 2 different athletes posted top 20 national performances in the high jump. Ture Stoudemire and Andrea Mita. Just always good when you can show up to meets and post top 20 national performances. This was both athletes' best performance, and it was notable that Stoudemire improved upon his Cougar debut performance in this meet. Let's see. I'm trying to go through everything, and what do you want to talk about? Let's go. Jamar Marshall Jr. winning the 60-meter hurdles for the second time in as many meets. Setting the facility and meet record for the fastest time, tying his career best mark. Also interesting, 5th best performance of the year in the country the week following the meet. So getting some really high level performances from the Cougs here. Marshall was an NCAA level athlete previously at Arizona State and was one of the secondary hurdlers last year behind Devion Wilson. Ample evidence this early indoor season that Marshall could be that guy this year for you. Always constantly looking for track athletes who are going to step up, and if you can do well on indoors, it usually translates pretty well to outdoor for you there.
Yeah, for that, we were starting to see who the key athletes are going to be on the sprints, the hurdles, and the field side.
Exactly.
Like I said, more recently, the Cougars were action this past weekend at the Robert Platt Invitational back in the friendly confines of the Yeoman Fieldhouse. Collectively, the Cougars had 7 victories, a total of 17 podium performances among all the athletes competing. This seemed to be more of an opportunity for the younger, newer athletes to compete for the Cougars as compared to the meet Bobby talked about, where I think it was a lot of your probable frontline athletes competing. We'll highlight I think 2 most notable performances for me. In the women's 60-meter hurdles, junior Casey McCoy, a Kansas transfer, she had a personal best time of 8.16 seconds in the 60 hurdles, the 5th fastest time in program history. And in the men's 200, Bryce Shabbat won the event with a time of 21.05 seconds, which is just 200ths off of a top 50 national time. Also, I want to shout out, he's an alumnus now, but the guy you just mentioned, Devion Wilson, was actually competing in this one as an unattached athlete in the men's 60 hurdles. Had the fastest time by a pretty decent margin in the prelims and semifinals while competing, as I said, as an unattached athlete. I was like scanning and seeing any of the Cougar alums competing at the Houston meets. So up next, the Cougars will be splitting between two different meets in College Station to compete at Texas A&M's Charlie Thomas Invitational, and we'll also have athletes competing at Virginia Tech's Doc Hale Invitational on Saturday as well. Bobby, one of the spring sports that we were really stoked to talk about last week, we had on Lydia Laspria to talk about Cougar women's golf, and they opened their season at the Guadalajara Collegiate Invitational, a performance that I think something to build upon. Like, it hopefully won't be your best of the spring, but also you still prove you belong with the haves versus the have-not programs in this field. You still you still show that you belonged with the better teams in the field, but you, I think, still look ahead at that one and say, yeah, we could do better in some aspects. So, Bobby, tell us about how the ladies did out in Guadalajara.
Yeah, one of those kind of weird tournaments where it's very, it was a very, very good field for this tournament, right? You have number 12, number 11, number 23, number 25 Houston, number 45, and number 43 here. Plus some other schools that do a decent job. And I think I texted you before this tournament that if the Cougs could finish in the top 4, 5, right, kind of finish in the order they're expected to, right? You go 11, you go Virginia at 11, Florida State at 12, and then you can kind of sneak in and TCU at 23, U of H at 25. Maybe you expect something like NC State or SMU to kind of jump in here, and maybe they jump ahead of you, but you beat Virginia at 11, something like that. That didn't exactly happen. It was a very weird tournament. The first round, the Cougs kind of were in their own little area, right? You have teams at -4. The Cougs were at +2. The next closest to U of H was, after round 1, was +8. So the Cougs were 6 from the lead, but also 6 ahead of the next closest team. So kind of an interesting thing there. The Cougs, really round 2, it was kind of a weird situation. I don't know if they were supposed to play 27 holes or if they were going to try and get 36 in, but they ended up playing 27 holes, and you could tell the Cougs were starting to feel it a little bit. Early on in round 2, the Cougs were really starting to get some putts to fall, getting some birdies, and we're starting to make a little bit of a move. Unfortunately, I guess darkness hit or something happened and they weren't able to play 36, but everyone stopped at 27 holes. Come back the next day, and the Cougs just did not play well on the second half of that second round. And then the third round, you kind of finished it again that day. You played another 27. Cougs actually did fairly well in round 3, but Cougs finished 4th at 10 over. The winner, Florida State, finished at 10 under, so you lost by 20 strokes. But the thing that was kind of, I don't want to say good, the thing that I liked is you were kind of in your own tier. You'd like to maybe pick off TCU. TCU goes really low, goes 4 under, finishes in second place. You maybe want to go a little bit better against the team that has beaten you twice in the fall events. But overall, hard to hate. You finished 4th out of you finished in the order in which you were ranked, so not too bad there.
From what you've told me about how strength of schedule and rankings and the postseason and seeding, all that is kind of computed in golf, doesn't seem like the kind of performance that would have any negative effect. Like you're
Correct.
about 25 in the country right now. Finishing 4th in this event isn't going to make anyone have any different opinion of what this year's team is going to be. It was cool to see Moa compete in the first round or so. Did drop back a bit there individually, but
still a top 5.
Yeah, top 5 performance. Never gonna sneeze at that.
Another notable performance here is Hyoji Kang.
Yeah, played really nice as your individual player.
Finished 20th. You also have Alexis Aldana finishing top 20 as well. So some performances to really build on. You just putting it all together. Maylin Kim jumps up 16 spots in the final round to finish.
Yeah, kind of a rough start, but seemed to finish better than she started.
Finishes in 23rd. So overall, a solid performance, not one that's going to make you go crazy and go, oh my God, this team's going to win a national title, but also not one that goes, oh no, this team had a terrible performance.
And we're going to stick with Cougar golf. The men will open up their spring season, split between two events, both teeing off early next week. They'll be playing at Sam Houston State's Bentwater and Collegiate at the Miller course of the Bentwater Country Club up in Lake Conroe. Bobby, you always like a private school guy. I've actually been to the yacht club at the Bentwater Country Club because it was a rehearsal dinner for a wedding that co-host emeritus Dustin and I were in.
Sure.
As well, like nice course from what people have told me. You will also have some individuals competing at Southern Nazarene's Houston Classic, which is going to be held at the Golf Club of Houston. Would assume based on historic participation that it's going to be your regular tournament 5 going to Bentwater and then some younger guys competing at the Golf Club of Houston. So no better place to start previewing the 2025 men's season than this one. Bobby, how are you feeling about the 2025 version of Cougar men's golf?
2025 Cougar men's golf is in, I don't want to say a weird position. They are ranked number 47th in the country, which is good for 8th place in the conference. But again, kind of like with the women's team, you look around you and you go, okay, actually TCU is 46th, Kansas is 45th. So you're in this completely kind of different tier, right? You have Colorado here at 34. There's going to be the big schools. There's 2 that are just going to kind of carry this conference. Number 2 in the country is Arizona State, a historically great golf school. Might have had a guy that
Mickelson's alma mater, right?
I was going to say a guy you might have heard of.
Even a golf casual like me knows that.
He plays golf left-handed. The place where he got his nickname Fig Jam was at Arizona State. So if you don't know what Fig Jam is, look it up. But that being said, you also have Oklahoma State at number 9, another historically great team in the conference. Sam, do you happen to know off the top of your head the name of the golf course that OSU plays on? It's their home course.
I'm going to assume it's named after Ricky Fowler or T. Boone Pickens. Not a bad guess, is it?
No, not a bad guess.
What is it?
It is named the Karsten course. Now, this is just, if you want any idea of how good Oklahoma State is and how good their facilities and things are and what you're kind of competing against, it's called the Karsten course. It's a semi-private, you can get on, but really it's made for that. Now, the name Karsten might not ring a bell to you, but that's the guy who started Ping Golf. So if you have any idea of how good their golf program is, the guy who started one of the biggest golf companies in the world, So Karsten Creek is where Oklahoma State plays. One day I will play that course. But enough talking about everyone else. Let's talk about our Houston Cougars. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. So this year you are going to have, just like the women, 4 or 5 people competing for the spots. I would say the people you kind of have locked in here is going to be Wolfgang Glow. You're probably going to see a lot of Hudson Weibel. Hudson Weibel had a very good year last year. You're also going to see a lot of Jacob Boro. And then it kind of gets a little interesting. So those 3 are going to be pretty locked in. And then you have Chi Chun Chin, which he's looked really good in the fall. So that's somebody who I would expect to come in and compete for that 4th spot. And then you just kind of have a smattering of that 5th player. Is it going to be Lorenz Schreigen, Ruben Lindsay? You have some guys. So the 4 or 5 that you're going to take with you to the tournament is going to change. That 4th player is really going to change, I think, from tournament to tournament. I think this team has a chance to make a regional, has a chance to, if they play well enough at the regional, to move on. I don't think it's out of the question that this team makes a regional and goes to the national championship.
And you're kind of in an impossible task of replacing recent program great Santiago de la Fuente. And I guess the good news is if you look at the fall results, it's a pretty balanced group just based on scoring averages.
Yep.
And the balance is good, but it was also nice to have someone as ridiculously consistent as De La Fuente in a sport where I don't know if there's any sport where it's definitively harder to have consistently great week in, week out performances than golf. Having De La Fuente kind of raises the floor of your performances, so to speak, when it's going to be a little more volatile around that player. And it's kind of scary to no longer have that guy kind of anchoring your tournament 5, but you have a lot of experience. And like you, I think, everything I've seen about this team points to it still being an NCAA postseason level team. Just maybe one without as high of a ceiling as the women's program does, but still a postseason program, which I don't think we're gonna seize that. Like you're not at that level in a lot of sports at U of H right now as a Big 12 program. So not gonna sneeze at it for the men's golf program.
Absolutely.
And since I forgot one theme already, Bobby, I won't do that twice. I won't make that mistake again. The hard house beats and tennis shots you're about to hear means that we're only in one place, and that's Cougar Tennis Corner. And we'll say it's a triumphant Cougar Tennis Corner this week after the Cougars beat 2 more quality opponents since we last talked about them, currently playing a tough one at Rice University. But for the stuff that's final, you have a 4-0 victory over UNT from last Friday and a 4-1 win over Tarleton State on Sunday. We'll recap the week that was in reverse chronological order and also look ahead to a big non-conference matchup after this Rice game on Friday. Bobby, does that all sound good to you?
Let's do it, buddy.
So Friday late morning, we finally, after 2 previous weather cancellations, got to see the Cougars play North Texas. Cougs won 4-0, took the doubles point and 3 of the singles matches to clinch the win before the Mean Green were able to get on the board. On the doubles court, we finally saw in her first spring action, Santa Strombaja teaming up with Lisa Morosova to dominate UNT's top pairing of Gianna Pialet and Stefani Informe. They won 6-1. Kind of expected once Santa was playing this spring that would be your doubles pairing. Those two played together a decent amount at that preseason FIU Invitational. This was actually, though, Strombaja and Morosova's first time playing together in a spring match. Even though they were teammates at Grand Canyon last year, Strombaja played with the now graduated Natalia Pusa with their top doubles pairing, and Strombaja mostly played with actually her current Cougar teammate, Eva Seppa, for GCU's Court 3. Didn't go as well on Court 2 for Seppa, who I just mentioned in Valeria Krohotina. They lost 6-2, and that was actually the first doubles match to go final, but kicking off what was a great week for these two, your third doubles pairing, Sophie Skoten and Gabby Cortez, won very convincingly on Court 3, 6-2. I actually watched this one the most live of all the doubles matches, and my general takeaway is they have unbelievable on-court chemistry for teammates who they played together like on the same team, but didn't play together on court hardly at all. The previous 2 seasons, you couldn't tell that this is like their 5th official spring match playing together from watching them over this past weekend. On the singles courts, I would say justifiably, I mostly watched Santa Strombaja's singles debut against Gianna Pialet. Strombaja came in this one as the number 79 ranked national singles player, and even against an opponent like Pialet, who at previous times in her career has been a top 100 singles and doubles college player, never really looked like anything but a convincing Strombaja win. I could tell from the feed that the wind on Friday was really affecting players. In Houston, really didn't affect Strombaja very much. Both sets were dominant, and she was actually the first off the court to give the Cougars a 2-0 lead. I also watched some of Eva Seppa in the second set because I haven't gotten to watch her as much in Hedda Newtonen on Court 3. After a really rough opening set where she lost 6-1, Seppa did a nice job of bouncing back. She had some chances to close out her opponent, Stefani Informe, and I don't know if she took them. Kind of the same story for Hedda, though I believe if she had to, that match would have been a win for her, though that one ultimately went unfinished because after Strumbaha's quick win, you got another quick win from Sophie Skoten, and Lisa Morsova closed things out on court 4 to give you the dub. In her post-match comments, Kat, the UH head coach, talked about how the Cougs' energy wasn't as good in the second set after a pretty strong opening sets across the board. The results, I think, support her point, and I don't believe if you allowed all these to go final that UH would have won 7-0. But I think worst case scenario, you win 5-2, and not to beat this phrase to death, but an opponent U of H should have expected to beat, an opponent who you lost to last season that you should have expected to beat that season as well. But I think the standard for Cougar tennis should be a lot higher this season, and was still nice to not have a pretty stress-free win over an opponent who beat you a season ago. And our third win came on Sunday over Tarleton State, which was kind of a script flip of that win over UNT. Worth a reminder, Tarleton had a ton of familiarity with the Cougars roster because over half these athletes are playing for Grand Canyon last year. Grand Canyon and Tarleton are conference mates. This was actually the first really stressful doubles of the season. For the second match in a row, Sepa and Krohatina did not play too well on court 2. Tarleton's pairing of Lorca and Morales won 6-3, put the Cougars in the uncomfortable position of having to take the remaining 2, not to go down 1-0. Both were very close. Sophie Skoten and Gabby Cortez took care of business 7-5 to win on court 3, and that kind of set up a showdown to take the doubles point on court 1 between Strumbaha and Morisova and Tarleton's top veteran pairing of Person and Berger, who I think I mentioned both of them. In the preview, they were 4-0 on the season coming into Sunday, and you had that situation where everyone else was done competing, so like you had all the athletes that were done on both sides cheering everyone on. You had the crowd into it. It was a pretty intense play. I would say it was the most intense finish of any of the singles or doubles that happened on Sunday. Ultimately, Santa and Lisa were able to avoid the heartburn of going to a tiebreaker and won 7-5. For the Cougars to take the double point, it was cool to see how amped the team was. After they got that point, Tarleton fought back in the singles round. They won the opening set in 3 of the 6 matches, put pressure on U of H more than either of your previous 2 opponents did. But I still wouldn't go as far to say I had any real doubt that U of H was going to win this. Valeria Krohatina was never really troubled on court 6. She won 6-1, 6-1. Strumbaha did a pretty good job against Emma Person on court 1. Beat her 6-1, 6-1 as well. Credit to Tarleton. They did get the first point off U of H of anyone this season. Their freshman Maria Castano gave Sophie Skoten her first singles loss of the spring season, a convincing 6-1, 6-4 win, but thankfully, not that long after that, Morisova, for the second straight match, closed it out for the Cougars with a straight sets win on court 4. Convincing win over a quality Tarleton opponent, and I was encouraged by how well the Cougars were doing in the 2 unfinished matches as well. Eva Sepa, who I think has had a tough week of tennis as compared to her teammates, was 1 game away from closing out a straight sets win where she had to come back from down in the first set and win via tiebreaker, which is always difficult. Hedden Newtonen was up 2-0 in the deciding third set of her match after a dominant 6-1 second set win after dropping her opener. As much as the Cougs have struggled with anything in this 3-0 start, Sepa hadn't been playing very well, kind of like I said, and even though technically her match went unfinished, it was great to see her playing well because, like any sport, tennis is so much of a confidence game.
Yeah, I think the most exciting part is just as a high-level tennis watcher and enjoyer, already more wins than we had all of last season. So go ahead and check that box off.
Yeah, right? You would hope to have higher expectations than 2 wins, but you cleared it, and we're happy they did.
There we go.
So the Cougars are currently down 3-0 to Rice. I would say this will probably go final after we're done recording. Probably was going to be a Rice win. Rice is a good team. They beat Arizona, a top 40 program, 4-1 at home this past weekend. It was going to be very tough. I was hoping you would be able to get a point before the singles went final, and doubles was super close in this one. Ironically, your top pairing was the only pairing that didn't do very well. Strumbaha and Morisova lost 6-2, but the other 2 doubles matches went to tiebreakers. Ultimately, Skoten and Cortez lost 7-6 on their court. Rice takes the doubles point, and right now they have 3 points, and they are up in all of the current games, except for Strumbaha's game, where she is up 2-1 in the second set, but lost the first one. So if I had to guess, probably Rice winning this one 4-0, but not an effort where I think the Cougars can take nothing away from it. You needed to face an opponent who's going to push you more than the previous 3 quality opponents that they did. This one did. I think you learned something about yourself from this one. You're not going to get hurt at all by this loss to a quality Rice opponent.
Yep.
And speaking of challenges to come, the Cougs will be traveling to Dallas on Friday as part of a month-long road swing by the program in February. They're playing an SMU program that's 3-4 in the current season, but I only think that 3-4 record reflects the fact that they've played a really difficult non-conference schedule. They played in an ITA kickoff event at I believe it was, I want to say it was, I can't remember where it was now, but they lost to Arkansas and Clemson. It wasn't at Arkansas and Clemson. Anyway, they lost at a top 25 Vandy program 3 weeks ago, lost on Sunday at home to number 19 NC State. In a way, U of H is an interesting test for them because I don't think U of H is yet on the same level as the 4 teams who SMU lost to, but also U of H is a good bit better than the 3 teams that SMU has beaten this year: ACU, Lamar, and UT Arlington. The Cougs actually didn't play them very much, but won both of their fall singles head-to-heads with SMU. Gabby Cortez beat SMU's Carolina McGinley at the HEB event at Baylor, and Eva Seppa defeated June Bjork at SMU's fall event. Cortez and Sophie Scoden also defeated an SMU pairing at that HEB event, I believe. Cougs have not won this head-to-head against SMU in about 10 years. I don't know if this team can break that trend, but I have more hope that the Cougs can compete in this one as compared to recent years. So that's what I'm excited about. Bobby, you'll be out there for at least some of that match. Excited for you to see this program in action.
Yeah, man. 3 times I will, when I get out there, that'll be the 3rd time that I will have seen this Cougar tennis team in the last, since Coach came on board. So
yeah, exactly.
More than I think I've seen any other sport for U of H.
All right, Bobby, we've made a tight 90 minutes. Take us home.
All right, well, that is it for this week's podcast. If you are still here, you are an absolutely insane person, and we love you for it. If you want to reach out to us and you want some, give us some feedback, we are always open to it. We might not accept it, but we're open to it. You can find us on Blue Sky at podcast.bsky.social. You can still find us on Twitter. We don't check it as often as we do the Blue Sky, but we do still check it. You can find us there at SH Podcast. And then if you want to just forego all social media and you want to send us an email, you can, shpodcast@gmail.com. We do check that and we do laugh at your feedback. No, I'm just kidding. We do see it and we do check it, and we will make sure that that we respond to it and take any feedback. We seriously, we do appreciate it. And then for those of you who have listened to our Patreon, Sam has done a great job giving a lot of premium episodes for basketball this year, some instant reacts, and he's done a great job with those, and those cost you $5 a month at minimum. If you want to give us more, we are more than happy to take more than that. If you want to give us 50,000 times that, we'll talk to you about naming this the Fill in the Blank podcast. I don't care, as long as we can still talk Cougar sports. But in all seriousness, go check out the Patreon, SH Podcast on Patreon. It's $5 a month to get some really awesome premium content from Sam and I. So that is it for this week. Sam, what do we always say, buddy?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs. Let's go.